Rich people do not get rich by acting rich. They get rich by controlling the story. And poor people do not stay poor because they are lazy. They stay poor because they bought the exact same illusion that the market sells them. Then they blame themselves when it did not work. In 2026, the illusion got louder. You can scroll for 10 minutes and see a young success photo that looks like a yacht brochure and sounds like motivation. But the math behind it is closer to credit card debt and rental agreements than freedom. This is not about one person. This is about a system that learned how to use your emotions like buttons, and it presses those buttons every day. This is not financial advice. This is financial education. And if you are anxious about AI taking jobs, inflation shrinking your paycheck, and housing costs swallowing your future, you are not paranoid. You are paying attention. The uncomfortable truth is that a lot of what you see online is not wealth. It is financing dressed up as achievement, and it is designed to keep you spending while the wealthy keep accumulating. Let's start with the part nobody wants to say out loud. The people who look the richest online are often the most leveraged in real life, and the people who are actually wealthy are often the least interested in proving anything to strangers. Picture a young man you have never met, probably under 25, posting a car photo with an aggressively expensive SUV, a watch on his wrist that screams status, and a caption about winning like winning is a personality trait. The background is perfect, the timing is perfect, the lighting is perfect, and the outfit is so branded it feels like a billboard decided to become a person. Now let's talk about what is happening behind the scenes, because I have watched this pattern in finance for more than 10 years. That watch might not be purchased outright. It might be a rental, it might be a counterfeit, it might be financed with a credit line that gets paid with the next credit line. That car might be a short-term lease meant for a weekend shoot. That outfit might be bought through installments where the monthly payment is just affordable enough to keep the story alive. And if you think I'm exaggerating, ask yourself a question that most people refuse to ask. Why would someone who is truly building long-term wealth risk their stability for one viral photo? The answer is simple. Because the photo is the business model. The appearance is the product. In 2026, influencer wealth is not just a lifestyle. It is a credit product with great branding. It is marketing dressed up as personal freedom. And the reason it works is that it hijacks a fear you already have. You are afraid you are falling behind. You are afraid your job is temporary. You are afraid your salary buys less than it did years ago. You are afraid that the future is moving without you. So when you see a perfect life for sale, your brain does not ask whether it is real. It asks how to get it. Here is the first brutal mechanism. Debt makes the illusion possible. In the real world, debt is the scaffolding that props up the fantasy. When prices rose and real wages didn't catch up, millions of households turned to easy credit, not because they wanted to be reckless, but because the math forced them into the gap. According to Federal Reserve data and multiple tracking efforts used by researchers, households have repeatedly carried high levels of revolving debt, and the cost of that debt is not stable when interest rates rise. In plain language, you pay interest on your mistakes, and it compounds. Meanwhile, online content markets luxury like it is the cure. It is not. Luxury is the symptom. Luxury is the visual signal that says, I can afford the life you think you cannot. But most of the time, that signal is built on borrowing. And this is where AI makes everything worse. In 2026, automation is accelerating job replacement, but people do not replace the income source as quickly as the bills grow. So the gap gets filled with whatever is easiest to access. Credit cards, buy now, pay later, personal loans, short-term financing that turns an emergency into a monthly obligation. The wealthy use AI to protect and expand assets. The anxious use AI to scroll, compare, and then spend. Same screens, different outcomes. So if you are wondering why looking poor can look like an advantage, it is because the wealthy are not constantly paying interest to maintain their image. That brings us to the first paradox you have to understand. The richest people often look modest, not because they are humble, but because they are rational. They protect cash flow. They protect optionality. They do not want to get trapped in purchases that do not improve their ability to buy assets later. Let's talk about names that have survived the test of time. Warren Buffett in public has always favored plain clothes and predictable routines. He is not trying to convince strangers that he is worthy. He is trying to keep his focus where wealth actually lives: ownership, decisions, and compounding. Jack Ma is famously not a constant luxury billboard. Mark Zuckerberg wore simple clothes long before it became trendy, because his personal brand was never the point. The point was scale, influence, and time. Now listen carefully. I'm not romanticizing them. I'm not claiming they are saints. I'm saying that their behavior reflects a principle that matters for your bank account. The wealthy usually treat consumption as a controllable expense, not an identity. But the social media machine does the opposite. It turns consumption into a survival strategy. It turns buying into breathing. And once buying becomes breathing, your debt becomes inevitable. Think about the young people who spend thousands chasing brands. You might see their posts and think they must be doing well, but sometimes their monthly income barely covers the monthly interest, and their wealth is actually a revolving cycle. Let me give you a micro story, the kind that makes you realize this is not a conspiracy. It is a pattern. A few months ago, I met a woman who lived in a major city. She was around her late 20s. Her monthly income was roughly 60 million in local terms, but her debt payments were nearly 33 million per month just in interest. That is not a little credit card use. That is financial gravity. She had designer bags, luxury shoes, a luxury watch, and cosmetic products stacked like trophies. The cruel detail was that many items were still unused, still unwrapped, still waiting to be staged. She did not buy luxury because she loved it. She bought luxury because she needed to feel safe about her status. She was trying to outrun a feeling, not a schedule. And yes, there are people who will say, so what? People can spend however they want. Sure, people can spend however they want. But here is the dark truth in the mechanism. When you buy expensive props to manage insecurity, you are not building wealth. You are outsourcing your emotional stability to brands that do not care if you drown. That leads to the second escalation. Luxury is not only sold to you as a product, it is sold to you as a story of scarcity, superiority, and permanence. Brands learn something very old about humans. You do not need a rational reason to want something. You need a believable reason to want it now. So what do? They manufacture scarcity. A friend of mine worked in supply chain for a luxury-adjacent network. He told me that for certain iconic products, the production capacity is higher than what ends up in stores. For example, a model might be produced at a capacity of 100,000 units a year, but only about 30,000 get released into the market. The rest is withheld, not because demand is impossible, but because withheld supply increases desire. Desire becomes demand. Demand becomes pricing power. Pricing power becomes profit. And the people who chase the item feel like they are winning when they are actually participating in the brand's controlled shortage. This is how limited edition turns into a marketing spell. It makes you believe the price is rising because the product is special, instead of remembering that the price is rising because the supply chain is managed to keep you chasing, and the market has evolved again. In 2026, there is an entire ecosystem of professional resellers who profit from the gap between what brands price and what impatient people pay. You are not just buying a luxury item, you are buying into an arbitrage economy where you are usually the last customer in the chain and the least informed one. Now, there is another lie nested inside the scarcity lie: luxury as investment. People tell themselves that buying a handbag or a watch is buying a store of value. They point to rare cases where certain models hold resale value, but they ignore the boring math. The average consumer is not buying a rare asset. They are buying mass-produced branding at a markup designed to look like prestige. A luxury bag might cost the company tens of millions in total category costs when you add materials, labor, shipping, and retail overhead. But the consumer price can be multiples of that. Even if you assume high manufacturing costs, you cannot justify the markup unless you admit the real product is not the bag. The real product is the logo recognition. And logos matter because social identity is social currency. In the United States, economists have long described how status goods work. Thorstein Veblen called it conspicuous consumption. It is the purchase not for use, but for display. The item functions like a uniform. It signals belonging to a class that the wearer wants to be seen as part of. That's why the most valuable luxury to the consumer is often the most visible luxury to everyone else. A canvas bag with a big logo plastered across it is designed for quick recognition. It is the retail version of a loud ringtone. But genuine wealth is usually private. Not invisible, just private. Wealthy people do not want to be treated as a brand. They want to be treated as a decision maker. This is why you often see a difference in how the rich and the insecure value attention. The insecure buy attention. The rich tolerate attention without paying the bill for it. Now we need to shift the story again, because this is where most people get stuck. They hear luxury is a trap, and they assume the solution is to be less materialistic. No. The solution is to understand the deeper game. In 2026, the financial system rewards asset ownership and punishes cash flow weakness. Luxury spending is not just about vanity, it is about liquidity. It is about whether you can survive rate changes, job loss, and health shocks. And your enemy is not being poor. Your enemy is being forced into bad decisions at bad times. Rates are not neutral. When the Fed changes interest rates, it changes borrowing costs, it changes mortgage rates, it changes credit card interest, it changes how expensive it is to stay afloat. Even when inflation prints cooler numbers later, purchasing power often does not return to earlier levels for ordinary households because wages lag and costs keep rising in categories like housing, insurance, and healthcare. Climate-driven disruptions also hit the middle class with quiet brutality. Insurance markets have collapsed in some regions, premiums have risen dramatically, and relocation costs have become a new tax on households that thought they were stable. When the roof costs more, the credit card becomes the backup. So when someone sells you the fantasy of luxury, they are also selling you a way to distract yourself from the stress of survival. It feels like relief. It feels like control. It feels like, at least I got something. But real wealth management is not about distractions. It is about building a system that keeps you from needing distractions. Now let's come back to the young man in your feed. There is often a reason his wealth looks shaky. It is because he is not optimizing for resilience. He is optimizing for attention. Attention can be rented with a rented car, a borrowed watch, and a curated wardrobe. But resilience is built with assets and habits that survive boring years. And here is where understanding gets darker. In 2026, wealth concentration is accelerating. The top 1% owns more wealth than earlier generations did at comparable stages, and the gap keeps widening because asset prices rose faster than wages in many periods. Meanwhile, the middle class is squeezed by housing costs and by the fact that pensions and retirement plans have not grown fast enough to offset inflation and healthcare costs. Social Security is under strain in multiple countries, and the reality is that the retirement age keeps creeping upward, while people still rely on systems that were designed for a different demographic reality. Aging populations mean fewer workers supporting more retirees. Underfunded pensions are not a theory. They are an accounting problem turning into a lifestyle problem. So what happens when retirement becomes uncertain? People either save early or they borrow now, and luxury content pushes borrowing now. But that is not even the worst part, because the luxury trap is only one branch of the bigger tree, the creator economy illusion. You see people talk about passive income like it is a lifestyle hack. You see thumbnails promising financial freedom. You see business owners with brand deals and affiliate codes showing expensive meals. But the reality is brutally simple. Most people who create content make zero, or close to zero. The platform pays a tiny fraction enough to live on, and the rest generate engagement that becomes data and revenue for the platform, not the creator's security. So some people become influencers to sell products, some become influencers to monetize attention, some become influencers to justify the debt they are carrying, and some become influencers because they were displaced by automation and the traditional job path suddenly stopped working. AI is changing work, and the pain of that change is being monetized. Your anxiety is being turned into revenue for someone else. So let's talk about the third escalation, how the wealthy actually spend, and why it looks almost boring compared to the feed. I want you to imagine two people. Person A makes around $100,000 a year, spends $40,000 on luxury to feel successful, and then lives on the edge. Person B makes a similar amount or even slightly more, but saves most of their extra money and invests it consistently. If person A buys expensive goods that lose value, they are basically converting future wealth into present emotion. Person B invests in assets that can compound over time. Over 10 years, the gap is not subtle, it becomes structural. And here is the part you have to face. Most people do not lose money because they made one terrible investment. They lose money because they consistently choose expenses that feel good today over choices that protect tomorrow. Now I promised you a sliver of empowerment at the end, so let's build it properly, not with fake motivation, with mechanisms. You can define real financial freedom in 3 levels. First is the freedom of not panicking about the cost of living. That means emergencies do not instantly become debt. Second is the freedom of time. That means you can choose a job that fits your life and your skills rather than taking the only job available. Third is the freedom of mind. That means you are not driven by social proof. You are not addicted to buying signals to calm your fear. Luxury spending is basically an attempt to reach the third level with the wrong tool. It buys a feeling, not a foundation. Now we need to turn this into an actual plan that you can apply, because you do not need another lecture. You need a model for decisions. The first thing is to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like an owner. This does not mean you become rich overnight. It means you treat money as something that should work, not something that should burn. One way to start is with income streams that are less dependent on your daily labor. Rent, dividends, royalties, rights. Some form of ownership that can generate cash flow without you trading your health for hours. If you are skeptical, good. Skepticism is protective, but the logic is still simple. If one income stream breaks, you need another to keep you from falling. So here is a rule that sounds boring and therefore people ignore it. Set aside at least 30% of your monthly income specifically to build asset-based options. If you start with $20,000 a year, you might think the amounts are too small to matter. But compounding does not care about your feelings. Compounding only cares about time and consistency. Now I will give you a rough example. If you invest $6,000 a year consistently for 5 years, you accumulate a base capital plus returns. Over 10 years, even moderate average returns can turn into meaningful monthly cash flow. Not enough to buy a luxury feed life, but enough to reduce the pressure that makes you take bad deals. And the point is not the exact number. The point is the direction. The direction is what changes your psychology and your choices. Second, change your thought pattern about investing. Instead of subtracting investing from what is left after spending, subtract spending from income first. That reverses